Good morning, everybody. Or actually, looks like there's quite a few Kiwis on here as well. So kia ora, good evening to you all. Welcome to today's CPG Masterclass series webinar. My name is Tom Bentley. I am the Communications and Event Manager for the Confederation of Professional Golf. So I'd like to welcome you as well. Before we do get started, just make sure your microphones are muted, just so we just keep the presentation uninterrupted. But keep your screens on if you'd like. We'd really like to see who's on the call. Say hello. We will be recording the webinar as well. So if you do miss anything or you'd like to access the slides afterwards, we'll upload that onto our YouTube channel, which is Confederation of Professional Golf, and also the Masterclass Hub Series page as well. So where you're registered, if you go in there, there's some webinar recordings. So if you want to go back and replay some of them that we've already we've had about 18, 19 so far, you can as well. We will be doing a short Q&A as well afterwards. So if you do have any questions for Ryan, post them in the chat option in the button below, and do that as we go along into the presentation as well, because we'll have an influx of questions to be able to start from at the end, and then I'll allocate about 10-15 minutes afterwards to do those. We'll get straight started. So I'll introduce you to Ryan. So he's the Executive Director for Golf Tourism New Zealand. He's a colleague I met from my time working at Cape Kidnappers golf course last year. And he's involved with the increasing the demand and supply of the golf tourism product in New Zealand, which for anybody who's not familiar with is something that is a project that's bringing in hundreds of millions to the New Zealand economy, and it's something that's not seen in other parts of the world so much in terms of a formalized golf tourism product. So it's going to be something really interesting, and hopefully it'll help you guys to be educated a little bit more in how you can develop your own strategy into marketing your golf clubs to the tourism market. So I'll hand straight over to Ryan, and I'll mute my microphone. So Ryan.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tom. And again, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you to those of you that have logged in to watch what we're discussing today. It's good to see some Kiwis on the call as well. I'll just say it now. I'm not sure everybody's familiar, but we've not been able to have haircuts in New Zealand for quite a while, so that's why this looks quite different than what's on the screen there. But we are officially enjoying our first real big day of freedom here today. So everything kind of reopened here, which is really a nice sign. What we want to talk about today is golf tourism and really how to create a strategy. What we are discussing today is going to be kind of mirroring what New Zealand has done, because we built a strategy from scratch. So as we've done that, we've learned some things. We've learned some things that worked. We've learned some things that haven't worked. So our philosophy has been to adapt pretty quickly and look at what we can do to constantly improve and meet the needs of a rapidly changing consumer. So we'll kind of fall back on some of what we've done to help you understand what is needed to put the steps in place to build a golf tourism strategy. So as Tom said, he was down in New Zealand. We were lucky enough to have him join us at Cape Kidnappers for a season. I'm sure some of you have been to New Zealand, some may have not been to New Zealand, but essentially where I am right now barely makes the map. We are a pretty tiny little spot in the South Pacific, population of about 5 million people, and quite surprising to a lot is 400 golf courses in New Zealand. So we have a huge supply of golf. The country itself is pretty keen on golf. It's really the #1 participation sport we have here. And we saw an opportunity to leverage that to international visitors. Now, this also kind of shows some of the challenges we face, but also some of the benefits that come from that as well. So we're essentially a long way from everywhere. So any myth you may have heard, if you've not been here, that you can kind of look out and see Australia in the distance is false. We're a solid 3 to 4 hours from Sydney to Auckland. So, you know, we're pretty much a long haul flight from everyone besides Australia. And we'll talk about what that means for how we created our strategy and how we target people. But it really kind of just paints that picture. We have a lot of people that think we must get a lot of business from Asia because it's closer than America, where it's really not. You know, we're 11 hours really to getting into kind of Hong Kong, and 12 hours to LA. So while we are a long way from everywhere, I think the product that we put forward is well worth the journey. So today we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to use New Zealand's learnings to understand how to adapt this to your location. And that could be everything from a single course, a group of courses, a city, a region, or even a country. We'll determine what will work, what gaps may exist, and what priorities should be, especially if you're doing this for the first time and you have not got a strategy in place now. And we'll recognize the value and need for golf tourism. And it's interesting, I'm a golf professional myself. I came through the green grass ranks, as I suppose a lot of you have as well. And a lot of clubs that I've worked at would never have thought about tourism. And what I mean by tourism, it could be a pretty broad statement. It doesn't mean we fling the doors open and allow everyone to come in. I think we're lucky enough on the call to have Paul Reed, who's the director of golf at Terra Iti, which I think a lot of you may be familiar with. Very private, very exclusive, very sought after golf course. But they do have a series of protocols that do allow you to access the golf course. So while you won't see them really featuring in a lot of our work that we do, there is a time and a place for really every facility to find some way to adapt to visitors, to attract visitors, and more importantly, to use that revenue in a positive way to, whether that's for capital improvements, whether that's for helping to reduce the membership burden. There's a lot of different ways that tourism dollar can be valuable. So what we need, and it's something that, again, we started this from kind of from zero. So a bit of our history, we had, again, a lot of golf courses in New Zealand, but no real strategy around it. So we'll kind of go through the steps here, but we need to understand the history. And again, whether that's a single course, a region, or a country, and get your hands on as much data as you can. For us, we were able to access a lot of historical content from golf courses about the origin of their players. A lot did have, a lot didn't have data. We were able to tap into the international visitor information available for departure polling. We were able to tap into a really forward company here called Market View that collects about 75% of every credit card swipe that occurs in New Zealand. So we could really kind of dig into a really big data set to start forming our strategy. We also went through pretty much every other strategy in the world. We read strategies from every country we could find. We took what we liked, we kind of discarded what we didn't like, and we adapted it for us. You need to identify the componentry of what you're going to offer. And by that, primarily, I mean the golf courses that are going to be involved. The supply side work, I guess, is something that is often overlooked. So a lot of places will say, yep, we need to attract visitors. Let's get 5 golf courses and create a little cluster and set off to marketing it. It's critical to look at the supply side and make sure you actually have golf courses that have a product that is what we call export ready, or ready to host international visitors. We need to get buy-in. And by buy-in, I mean, ideally, we want the golf courses on board. For New Zealand, having our local golf travel trade, the inbound operators on board, was enormous. The role they play is gigantic in the work that we do. And also, having government support, whether that's local, regional, national, and some of the more influential people in the golf market. Everybody can play a role in what we do. Funding is also quite critical. We've been quite fortunate here that everything we do is funded by central government. So we've never taken a dollar from the golf courses that we promote to the international market. And I'll talk a bit more about that later. The messaging and the content, in terms of how you craft your message, what it looks like, and then actually how you promote it, what vehicles, what avenues you use. And then quite importantly is the ability to adapt, to be as nimble as you can, because obviously trends change quickly. It's a big world. You're attracting people from all over it. Being able to adapt fairly quickly to changing circumstances, changing needs, is critical. And I think that's what's helped us see a good bit of success over the last few years. So we'll talk a bit, again, from a New Zealand perspective about where we were. So I mean, we started with a huge investment, well into the hundreds of millions of dollars in privately built, but resort / visitor products. So Kauri Cliffs, Cape Kidnappers, both top 50 in the world, Jack's Point, Millbrook, in Queenstown, Paraparaumu, near Wellington. We had some really amazing golf product that was known around the world, that was built with private capital, but was all kind of doing its own thing. We had a prime minister who also happened to be the minister of tourism, who was a very keen golfer and recognized that there was a potential for golf tourism. And we set about kind of looking at what that potential was. What we were able to find was that, by our best estimates, as of 2012, we wrote our strategy in 2013. As of 2012, inbound golf tourism to New Zealand was worth about 145 million New Zealand dollars annually. So that's international visitors coming into the country. That's a figure that I think we should keep an eye on, because we'll show you how that's progressed since that 2012 number. Some key success factors that worked for us that I think a lot of you will find in various ways in your own instances is, again, we had that private investment. We had a willing national body that understood the journey we wanted to take them on. We did obtain that buy-in of the golf courses and the stakeholders. We were able to get our golf courses to commit to providing data. So the only thing we've ever asked our golf courses for that we work with, so we have 400 in the country, we promote 37 to an international visitor. I'll talk a bit about that process shortly, but those 37, again, have never had to contribute any money. What we do ask is that monthly, they provide the origin of their international visitors for us, so we can actually track where people are coming from. And then we have tools in the background that will help us analyze the spend. So we care more about spend than we do volume. Excellent content. We'll talk a bit about that. And then what I like to say, essentially we run a bit of a dictatorship in our golf tourism strategy, but it's a small centralized group of expert decision makers is pretty key. There's really no roadblocks that I have in my way. There's no one that wants to form a committee that doesn't really understand. Again, all of you in the club background would be familiar with a club committee where you have 8 board members, none of which have ever run a golf course, and all feel like they're experts. And just like none of us would go into their dentistry practice and tell them what supplies to order, they feel like they're experts to come into our world and tell us how to run our facilities. So really being able to push out those that just wanted to make noise and surround ourselves with people that we really trusted to help us push forward was critical. So where we are now as a destination, so we were able to get Tourism New Zealand, our national tourism board, who I contract to identify golf as what we call a special interest. So we have special interest categories that are food and wine, hiking, cycling, ski, and golf. And those special interest categories were identified as areas where consumers would spend more, stay longer, and immerse themselves in the destination, travel regionally, with the exception of ski, which obviously has to come when there's snow. A lot of these will travel outside of just one peak season or one kind of 100-day stretch. So that was quite critical. We created Golf Tourism New Zealand, which is the entity that kind of delivers this strategy. And one of the first questions we asked that I think was really paramount to the success we've been lucky enough to achieve is we asked ourselves the question, is this money or merit? Meaning a lot of strategies that you see around the world are simply marketing co-ops. Somebody says, look, there's 20 golf courses in the region. If everybody puts 10,000 euro in, we're going to pool that money and we're going to go out and market our destination to the rest of the world. That's all well and good. What you may find is if there's 10 in the region, only 8 can afford the 10,000 euro. And what do you know? 8 are in, 2 are out. We really didn't like that at all from the standpoint that some of our best golf is club-based golf. It's courses that could never afford a high-priced buy-in. And we felt we couldn't, in good faith, look at the international market, whether that's a consumer or travel trade, and actually say, look, come to New Zealand and play these golf courses. Oh, by the way, we're not including some of our best because they couldn't afford to buy in. We didn't like that. We also didn't like the opposite, which is, let's say, a fairly average golf course that has deep pockets and could buy their way into a strategy that they otherwise really don't have any right to be involved in. So we set about creating our own unique criteria. So we have a pretty robust assessment that looks at both the golf course and the facility. The course itself is the most heavily weighted component. So there's a point system that the golf course itself must score to be actually considered to be of interest to an international visitor. And then we set about looking at the facility in terms of service levels, food and beverage, language spoken, retail, payment methods, content, imagery, everything else. But you could have the best clubhouse, the best service, and the best golf shop in the world. But if your golf course is a flat paddock with 18 flat greens, you're not going to make the cut. So the golf course is paramount, and then we look at the facility. Those that make the cut are what we call our marquee courses. So they're high quality, they're aspirational, and most importantly as well, they're accessible for visitor play. So right now we have one Royal Club in there. Royal Wellington is part of that. Again, Royal Clubs aren't typically noted for flinging the doors open to people. Royal Wellington is part of our strategy, but they do limit visitor play, which we have no problem with. In the near future, we're hopeful to add Royal Auckland, which is coming out of a $63 million renovation right now. And again, it isn't about just saying, hey, every tee time is up for grabs, come on in, take anyone you want. It's just about making sure that there is a visitor component that is available. And we really set these 14, what we call marquee courses, up on a trail. It's nothing that we invented necessarily. It's something that a lot of visitors have been doing for years, starting north and finishing south. We're fairly fortunate that our best activities sit next to our best golf. And we've insulated those marquee courses with 23 of what we call our New Zealand experience courses. These are primarily club courses, but they help add length of stay, they help add spend, they add some value for money, but they also get a chance for people to interact with real New Zealanders, which I think is a really key component of what we've done. We like the fact that New Zealanders are willing to host visitors that come. What I find in New Zealand are people are very proud of their golf courses. So when they see an international visitor, they want to tell them how great the facility is. They want to tell them about how fantastic the design is and what you'll find in the 7th hole. And they're very welcoming, which I think is fantastic. But the experience courses for us were critical in being able to get buy-in from local councils as well. Because what we were doing was increasing the length of stay and therefore increasing the spend. And as you'll notice, these are quite scattered around New Zealand. So we were able to move people around and show that all that spend isn't in just one place, but that spend is actually moving throughout the country. We put all of this intellectual property that we created into Tourism New Zealand, which is the National Tourism Board, and we started our marketing campaign. So the first step of that campaign was getting our content right. So we were lucky that we had a lot of great content. We also, as a tourism board, decided to spend the money to create some of our own content as well. And what I tell people all the time, we had a client meeting this morning, is that you don't need 100 images of your golf course. You need 4 or 5 really good images of your golf course. This is the 16th hole at Kauri Cliffs, shot by Gary Lisbon. We need a few powerful images that you can use at trade shows and in collateral when talking to travel trade. They don't need to see 30. They need to see a few, but the few you have to be quality images. Gary's Australian-based, one of the best photographers in the world, in my opinion. And travels all over the world, but there are also phenomenal photographers all over that you can find. It's just convenient for us, and it's a great relationship for us as well. But those images are really critical in our ability to put the product out for golfers to see. We also needed some video content with that. And again, it doesn't need to be 20 minutes of slow-moving drone footage. It needs to be fairly powerful. So we've got a very short video I'll show you now, shot by one of the most talented videographers I've ever met, Jacob Showman, who's from Europe. This is a video he shot of Cape Kidnappers. And again, it's short, but it's quite powerful, and it really sends a strong message that allows us to go out to consumers, to travel trade, play at trade shows, and try to get buy-in. I mean, that's an example of something that we use quite often that helps tell the story when, again, we're trying to kind of stop people in their tracks. We have shot our own video content as well that does kind of talk about our marquee courses. And that's part of the campaign that we've created. So what I would say is, you need some kind of campaign, you need some kind of advertising behind this. What we did was kind of look at our DNA, what makes New Zealand unique, what makes people want to come to New Zealand. And we decided that, one thing we have working to our advantage here is it's a fairly small package, but it is quite unique in the variety that we have. So we see the country change substantially from the top of the North Island, which is subtropical, to the middle of the North Island, which is more of that kind of crumbled earth, to the bottom of the South Island, which is alpine. So we had that great variety. New Zealand is not a place that's done a huge amount of earthworks and brought in a lot of bulldozers. It's primarily laying out a golf course on pretty spectacular land that already exists. So we branded our campaign Courses of Nature. This is the cover to our golf collateral that we use. And we've created about a 2-minute Courses of Nature video. This is the very end of it.
Like a world-renowned Kauri cliffs. Close by, you'll find impressive dining experiences with locally sourced produce and acclaimed wine and craft beer. And a world of relaxation and adventure. New Zealand, where nature invites you for a golfing experience unlike anywhere else in the world.
So one thing you'll notice in our content, and the reason I just played the end of that video, was that we never talk about golf without talking about other ancillary activities or complementary activities. So we always talk about our food and wine, our luxury lodges, our hiking, our cycling. What we found when we did that strategy work, which I think is quite unique, almost every strategy we read, which was shocking to me, almost every single strategy targeted just golfers. And I know saying something other than that would sound a little silly, but if you think about it, think about how many golfers we know, and take the British Isles, for example. So many people brag about how much golf they played in a short amount of time. You'll have people sitting around a table saying, oh, we went and played 5 rounds in 3 days. Oh, we played 7 rounds in 3. It's for whatever reason about bragging about 36 holes a day for 3 days, and it's pub food and it's 3-star accommodation. We kind of looked at that and said, well, that doesn't make any sense. What we actually care about is spend and length of stay. So we want to attract people to stay longer, spend more, and groups of guys don't typically do that, but couples do. So we really went out looking at attracting couples to our destination. What we found was that it was very easy to sell the imagery that we had to golfers. Golfers would look at it and say, I'm in. What it then came down to is the non or light golfing spouse that was the decision maker. So that's why we always have to talk about the non-golf activities. What we have found is we bring in a huge amount of spouses, and those spouses are using spas and wineries, and could be that one partner is playing golf and the other is doing a local activity, and they meet up in the afternoon for something. What that's done is skyrocketed our spend. That golf is the hero of the trip, but a lot of other things are taking place as well. So we spread the message through a variety of means. And these are things that there's nothing here that's earth-shattering. We use newzealand.com, which is the Tourism Board's website. We use a media and PR approach. So we believe more in bringing in journalists and providing stories and placements rather than buying advertising, although we do buy some. We do a tremendous amount with travel trade. We host a lot of familiars or familiarization tours where we will bring in media from around the world, we'll bring in travel agents from around the world, and in some cases we'll even bring in club captains, GMs from clubs that we partner with, and show them New Zealand. One thing that's quite unique as well, I think, about selling golf is when you think about targeting wine drinkers. Wine drinkers are difficult because you can buy wine in a whole lot of areas. You can buy it on the internet, at a bottle shop, at a supermarket, at a restaurant. Finding a wine drinker is expensive and difficult. Golfers congregate at golf courses. We target certain markets. We therefore then find the best affluent golf clubs in those markets, and we're able to speak directly to our consumer in the times that we want to do that. So golfers are easier to target. So we do some of that through consumer events. We do a lot of trade shows through IAGTO, the International Association of Golf Tour Operators. Amazing organization. I put David Ford's information up there. I haven't asked him, but I'm sure he's fine with that. If you're not a member of IAGTO, the networking opportunities, the ability to reach travel trade, and get your product out there is there's nothing else like it that you'll find out there. We have a joint venture that we're in the middle of now with IAGTO that's been a pretty massive opportunity for New Zealand to tell our story to the world. And we do partnerships as well. So we partner with brands and events that make sense to complement what we do. And we use influencers. So Lydia Ko has been really good for us. Some of the rugby players have been great for us, the cricketers. And I think everybody will find influencers in your own market. In terms of our focus markets, we picked 3. And I think this is quite critical because it's a big world. It's difficult and expensive to market to all of them. We've gone with North America, China, and Australia as our 3 key markets. North America, because it's the largest, most mature golf market in the world. China, because it's the fastest growing golf market in the world. And Australia, because they're our closest markets and they're the most likely to be repeat visitors. Now, with that said, we do absolutely market into Europe and into other parts of Asia. Tourism New Zealand has 14 offices around the world that we're fortunate enough to tie into. But we really focus on those 3 key markets. And that's, again, where IAGTO is really big for us. But it also means it's a little less overwhelming when you can identify why you're going to target certain markets, allocate your spend. And then again, if there is extra money, if there's joint venture opportunities, by all means, you can venture out of that. But if you basically say, I'm going to fling the doors open to the world and try to reach everybody, I think what you're going to find is a fairly diluted result rather than a focused result. We do get asked what are our competitor markets. I mean, essentially, our competitor markets is everywhere. Everybody's got a tourism strategy nowadays. And I think as we start to reemerge at the end of the COVID situation we're going through now, you're going to see a lot of countries reimagining what they're doing, as we are right now as well. So there's going to be a lot of people vying for that dollar, which is why the strategy has to be pretty specific. You have to understand who you're going after and what markets you're going to target. And again, I guess to finish up, we'll talk a bit about the supply side. But again, we have a fairly robust assessment process. So we do check and recheck that the golf courses we market to an international visitor remain to the correct standard. There's nothing worse to me than a visitor saying they wasted their time. I'm really not that concerned about their money. I think the exchange rate's quite favorable. I wouldn't say our golf is overly expensive. What I am concerned about is a visitor coming and saying, man, I wasted 5 hours. What I find are people are more time poor than cash poor. So while yes, I'd be upset if somebody wasted $100 on a green fee, what I'm more upset is that they wasted 5 hours of a once in a lifetime trip to New Zealand on a golf course they didn't feel was up to their expectations, and they could have been doing something different. So we really try to value their time. We've trained and educated, so we've done a series of education modules that we've put out to the market. We've talked about visitor expectations. We've talked about what different markets require. We've talked about caddies and online booking and retail and F&B and service levels and all those different things, especially based on the markets that we talk about. As much data as you can possibly get, again, is fairly critical. I guess to finish up where we sit now, since those 2012 numbers, we've had over 300% growth in our golf tourism to a total of in excess of 450 million New Zealand dollars at the end of 2019. And again, this is done on a shoestring. It's hard to put a specific number on it because of the way we do it, but I would say without any doubt, under $1 million New Zealand dollars a year to promote an entire country to the rest of the world. In a lot of years, I'd say it's a few $100,000 we spend on golf tourism. Golfers spend 30% more than our average visitor. They are the highest spending visitor that we get into New Zealand. They travel all throughout the year, which is also very attractive from a government perspective. They stay longer, and they are the most satisfied visitor of everyone we look at. So our golfers that visit New Zealand are almost off the charts in what we call a net promoter score, which means that they go home and don't just say, yeah, I liked it. They actually go to their social network and their friends and actively talk about how amazing their visit was. So it's a very good consumer to have. In terms of volume, from 2007 to 2017, we estimate about 850,000 international visitor rounds played in New Zealand. But I really only put that in there because I get asked that question quite a bit, but we really care more about the spend. I'm fine with lower volume as long as the lower volume spends more. That's really where we want to take this. So, really, I think that's a snapshot of where we are. I'm very happy to answer questions. I'm happy to do some one-on-one chats with people via email or whatever you may need moving forward as well. But we wanted to make sure you had an understanding and a framework of what the pieces were, and obviously adapt that to your specific either location, destination, region, country. But happy to take any questions or comments you may have.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Ryan. Yeah, just reiterate what he said. If you've got any questions, please just post them in the chat now, and I'll spend a bit of time asking them while we're waiting. I guess I'll just get started if that's okay, Ryan. I've got a couple of questions for you. One of the sort of key messages with GTNZ's sort of product is it's quite a concerted, collaborative effort between clubs. Sort of applying that to maybe a market such as the UK or Europe, where you've got clubs that are very well established, committee members, etc. Was there a challenge in getting that initial buy-in with clubs in New Zealand, and sort of how did you overcome that? Because ultimately these are sort of natural competitors to one another if you look at it at face value.
Yeah, and I think that was the original thought from some, and what we've really turned them into is what I think is a very team approach to this. I mean, what we find now is if a visitor turns up at a golf course on day one and needs 2 ladies left-handed rental sets that they forgot to mention, that golf course is ringing the next one down the line and saying, hey, just a heads up, you've got 2 people turning up tomorrow that need 2 ladies left-handed sets of clubs. So it's actually become very collaborative. What we're now looking at is much more collaboration with Australia as well. We've had kind of a trans-Tasman discussion that, if people are traveling down to this part of the world, they want to play Royal Melbourne as well. They want to play Cape Wickham. They want to play Barnbougle. So we really don't look at it as competitors. We look at it as, for people at least coming to our destination, we know they're not going to land in Auckland and stay there for 2 weeks. We know they're going to move around the country. So rather than be selfish and try to capture 100% of their spend at your facility only, you hope that they come and have a great time. What we really talk about is making a memory. And it sounds kind of corny, but we don't expect people to remember the 5th green at a golf course in Auckland. What we expect them to do is remember the day they had at that golf course in Auckland, and then go to the next course and do the same thing. And that word of mouth is so powerful that I think our golf courses would actually all look at each other much less as adversaries and much more as people that are helping each other to rise the tide.
Would you put that down to a cultural shift in mindset from sort of an Australasian kind of open-minded to Europe, very well established, kind of not egotistical, but kind of more mature market? Is that the reason that people are collaborating more?
I think so. I mean, I think we also look at it, Queenstown's a really good example. We've got 3 of our best golf courses in Queenstown. They're all within about a 10-minute drive of each other. And very quickly they realize that when they actually pool their resources and work together, they all see volumes increase. So rather than one of them saying, oh, we're better than that one, no, we're better. It's not about who's better. It's about harnessing the power of the 3 to attract more volume. And all of a sudden we're starting to see clubs down the street from each other that may historically be saying, oh, you know what? If we both accept some visitors, more people will come because there's 2 of us. And if we can get a 3rd, even more people are going to come. I did originally have some of the more private clubs, some of the club captains that have said, well, why would we want to be a part of this? And the metrics are pretty quick to show their value. Membership golf is actually quite affordable here in New Zealand. But what we were able to show is that, there are members out there that are playing 220 rounds a year and netting their round of golf down to, $18 a round. And they're coveted by clubs. Our best member is Tim. Tim played 311 rounds last year. Well, Tim's not really your best member. Tim's getting golf for the cheapest price of anybody out there. What we can offer you is a foursome of visitors that are going to come in from arrival to departure, maybe 5-6 hours total, but they're going to buy a sandwich and a beer and hopefully a hat and maybe a shirt and possibly hire some clubs and pay greens fees. The spend of those 4 golfers in 6 hours is a huge amount when you look at the spend of members over the course of the year. So it was very easy to show the metrics of why some limited visitor play made a lot of sense for these clubs. And all of a sudden, those that were skeptical became our biggest allies, kind of begging for more.
Yeah. Okay. A couple of questions from Andy Gordon, who's from Lumine in Spain. Hi, Andy. Thanks for joining. Sort of focusing on the actual markets themselves. was there a sort of analysis that you did in USA, China, Australia in terms of the regions to target and the people to target? Because you're talking about a high spend visitor. I'm just thinking back to my time at Cape, you know, in America, some of the key Americans that came over from sort of New York, Chicago, and the West Coast. Was there a region by region analysis and a consumer analysis done?
Both, and actually all of that is purely discoverable. So if you go to newzealand.com to the visit component of that, you can actually find our strategy written in 2012 on there, and it does give the insights into the markets. We're currently writing the 2.0 version of that because we admit we got some things wrong. But we did identify key markets and why those markets were important. You know, in that paper, we also talk about Japan and Hong Kong and Korea, and markets that certainly have appeal and value, but that we just felt we had to make decisions about where our money was best spent. One thing we do like is direct flights. So, you know, from America, for example, we're about to launch a New York, Auckland nonstop. We've got Houston, Dallas, Chicago, San Francisco, Los Angeles. So those are the key markets that we focus on. And then we start to focus a bit on those feeder markets. So the Chicago flight, for example, is where a lot of our New York, Boston, Philadelphia crowd is coming from. So, you know, we kind of chase backwards, if that makes sense. The direct flights and then the markets that feed directly into those flights as well. You know, India, to me, is possibly the next China. We have no direct flights from India right now, so we really don't focus much on India at the moment. The moment we get a direct flight, absolutely, I would spend more of our resource looking at that market. But again, you know, we're a small country with a fairly small budget. There's only so much we can do. If you're a Dubai that, you know, is throwing, you know, $1 billion at golf tourism over the next 10 years, is what they're talking about, or Vietnam, who's got, you know, double-digit courses under construction and huge amounts of money and signing Greg Norman as ambassadors and things like that. Yeah, you can certainly do a much more shotgun approach. We had to take a laser focus. That lasers worked better for us.
Okay, I hope that answered your question, Andy. As I said, just keep posting questions if you've got any in the chat. Another one I just wanted to sort of focus on. One of the key lessons I wanted to get from this particular webinar, we've had some focus on social media marketing and stuff, but I sort of wanted to pass that message to the listeners that it's all well and good having good content, good videos, good photos, etc. But New Zealand demonstrates that behind that content, you have to have a coordinated strategy with objective goals and data to analyze it. So if you're a club that's wanting to all of a sudden create a marketing campaign, some of the key points from this are really important, aren't they, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, again, content is critical, but knowing what to do with it is also very important. You know, I see a lot of clubs that try, but really don't have any expertise in it. And it's one of those things that you can learn pretty quickly. There's a lot of knowledge out there that you can pull in, and there are a lot of people that are willing to help. What I also find is typically the travel world doesn't speak golf, and the golf world doesn't speak travel. And that was an original hurdle we needed to get over. You know, we had golf courses and tourism organizations trying to work together, and none of them understood the terminology and the acronyms and the abbreviations and what it meant to, you know, aerify and core and top dress and overseed and everything else. So, you know, there was a bit of a learning curve for both sides in the beginning. But what we found was that, you know, that the tourism operators, and while you may not know who your regional tourism operator is, your national tourism operator, I think you'd be surprised at how keen they would be to talk to you because you've got an asset that's already in place. All they need to do is help you to leverage that a little bit. So it's much less work on them. But again, it's a matter of reaching out and finding out who they are, probably upskilling yourself a little bit on how they operate, and making sure that you're patient with them as they try to understand how golf operates, which I'm sure will be new to most of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. A question from Alessandro, focusing on Italian tourism. I suppose I'll generalize that to European. Do you have a sort of opinion on European tourism at the minute and where that's sort of what I guess the key goals are of that, or where that could go maybe in the future? I suppose it's a bit distance away from where you are at the minute, but any opinions?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, Europe is actually a really powerful market for us. What we find, though, is that the European traveler comes in and plays golf, but it's not the reason for coming necessarily, which is one of the reasons we don't focus on them. However, we get a huge amount of lifestyle visits from Europe, people that are coming for the hiking, the cycling, a little bit of golf, some sailing, some fishing. So we do absolutely talk to that market. The flight connectivity has gotten so much better. There's now London-Perth nonstop. They're trying to do Sydney-London nonstop. It's interesting when some of New Zealand's kind of hero courses were built, Cape Kidnappers and Kauri Cliffs being two of them. The owner felt that the Concorde was obviously connecting Europe and the US supersonic, and the next destination would be Sydney. You'd be able to get from Europe to the South Pacific in supersonic record time. Well, all of a sudden that didn't happen, but we're seeing much better flight connectivity. Obviously right now the world's going through a unique time. We're trying to gather insight as fast as we possibly can, and it changes by the minute. But I think there's a lot of pent-up demand that still exists. And certainly from our side, the research we have done has shown that when the handcuffs are taken off, the world will absolutely be willing to travel again. So from our perspective, we have paused some activity now. We've by no means mothballed it. And when the time is right, we will absolutely be back out talking to the European markets and the other markets we care about. And I think everybody may be a bit down at the moment. Lives have changed and business levels are down, but anymore people have a fairly short memory. As soon as a Kardashian does something stupid, the headlines are going to change for a little bit. And I think we will get back to a sense of normalcy, hopefully sooner than we think.
Yeah, just to reiterate that as well, I suppose, in that things are starting to look a little bit up. I wanted to try and avoid the key, the buzzword at the minute, which is COVID-19, but things are opening up again, which is obviously a positive sign for golf and for golf tourism. And I know across Europe, we're lobbying governments at the minute, and Austria, Germany, to name a few, have opened up. The UK opened up yesterday. I played my first round of golf, although it probably resembled more like cricket, considering the score that I shot. Just a quick one.
From our side too, this is a great time to be doing this work. This is a great time to be reimagining what you're doing and creating the groundwork so when the doors do reopen, you actually can hit the ground running rather than doors reopen and then you say, oh, geez, I should start thinking about how I want to attract visitors or members back.
Yeah, it epitomizes the key message from this series really as well, in that we're just trying to urge PJs, PGA pros, etc., to just rethink some of the stuff they're doing, and this is definitely a key part of that. Quick question about NZ Golf and the PGA of New Zealand. Do you have much interaction with them, and how, do they play a role in what you're trying to do? I'm thinking more of a training and education side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we work closely with the New Zealand PGA and with New Zealand Golf. So we actually have a joint venture at the moment between Tourism New Zealand and New Zealand Golf. So I kind of straddle both sides of that relationship, and it's worked out very well. Obviously, New Zealand Golf holds a lot of expertise. Tourism New Zealand holds a lot of tourism expertise. The two of them working together has proved to be a fairly powerful partnership. And the PGA has been fairly critical to help get the message out to their membership. So we were working pretty hard to, again, train and educate. So in the beginning, I would say 80% of our work was supply side improvement, 20% was demand creation. And that's now flipped. We feel like the product is pretty much where it needs to be. So we're about 20% supply side improvement, 80% demand side. So the PGA still does play a role in helping us keep people educated and keep the knowledge level up, ensure that they understand what the expectations are from visitors. Because obviously what a domestic member needs is quite different to what an international visitor expects.
Yeah, okay, cool. And then finally, just from me, one more is that we were talking just before this chat about the Trans-Tasman bubble, or the proposed Trans-Tasman bubble. Yesterday, the EU Commission have spoken about a gradual reopening of tourism and borders as well. Is this going to be, especially, now at the minute with the current situation, is this going to be a long-term trend that we're going to see where certain markets collaborate with one another more so? And is that sustainable?
I think it's actually quite interesting that what we're seeing is probably more open, frank, collaborative conversations than we've ever seen before, which is fantastic. So we're actually seeing nations talking to each other about what they can do to help lift each other, which is awesome. So yeah, I absolutely think that domestic tourism will bounce back first. We'll then work our way into some bubbles and some regional stuff. And then I think slowly the world will open back up. but I think we'll do it in a much more collaborative sense, which I think will be fantastic.
Okay, cool. Good to hear. One question from Matt. How do you determine golf as a reason for coming to New Zealand over other special interests? I think he's talking about when it became a special interest. How was that actually determined? Was that based on value or just lobbying efforts, etc.?
I'm just plugging in here real quick. So originally, the golf discussion that we had was unique because, again, most of the people we were talking to did not speak golf. We had a tourism board that I think was very capable with very few golfers in the mix. So a lot of times golf was just in the too hard basket. People would look at it and say, you know what, we don't understand the language, how it works, the seasonality, the weather, the conditions. What's next? Let's move on to cruise or ski or hiking or cycling. We were able to show again that we could target golfers quite easily. So for us, a great example. We know the Australian market is critical in what we do. We know that Sydney and Melbourne are going to be two of the key cities that we want to target, and we know that Royal Melbourne has a robust membership that is affluent and has the ability to jump on a plane and fly to New Zealand. So we forge a relationship with Royal Melbourne, and we can talk directly to their members. And we do that through club events. We do it through partnerships. We do it through a lot of things. But forging those relationships, I think, was a really powerful tool to tell the tourism board that, look, we can make this happen pretty easily. It's not nearly as difficult as you think.
Okay, hope that answered your question, Matt. I get, one more, just a second. What are the expectations, preconceptions of visitors with regards to New Zealand climate? That's an interesting one. How does is there any relation or factoring in of New Zealand as I guess broaden that question, New Zealand as a country, climate, landscape, etc. What are the expectations, preconceptions of that as a country when they're coming?
I mean, it's interesting. We definitely are quite honest up front. I mean, New Zealand is an outdoor destination. It's not a place that you're going to sit inside a whole lot. If you're spending a lot of time in your hotel room, you're probably not doing New Zealand the right way. Tom, you lived here. It can change pretty rapidly. We're a narrow sliver of land with a whole lot of water around us. But if anything, we use that as an advantage. I mean, we have very mild summers. We have very mild winters. Our golf season is long. Our daylight's quite long. Queenstown, you can play golf until almost 11 o'clock at night during our summer, that kind of December, January, February period. We try to look at all of that as a positive, but we really are a 12-month golf climate. Kauri Cliffs, subtropical, Auckland, almost subtropical, would never frost up there. The Cape Kidnappers and Royal Wellingtons and Kinlocks would get a few frosts now and then. And even down in Queenstown, where there's alpine skiing in the winter, you can still play golf during the day. So we look at it as an opportunity to spread our golf travel out 12 months of the year. While we understand they will come in a few more of those concentrated months, but we've had really good success spreading the season out, with really October and March becoming two of our most successful periods.
Yeah, I'd just probably add to that, Nick, a little bit from my own experiences. The winters are definitely far less harsh. I always used to like to explain it as New Zealand's a lot like the UK, but nice. I'll just say, and a lot less people. Okay, we'll close things off with that, with the Q&A. Just before everybody leaves, just want to thank everybody for attending today's webinar. Really appreciate the support and for you coming up. I know it's late there over in New Zealand and from wherever else you are in the world. And also thank you to you, Ryan. As I said, it's what time is it there now? Nearly 10 o'clock at night. I know you work 25 hours a day, 8 days a week. So it's really appreciate you taking the time out for us to come and speak to us.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for joining in, and I appreciate the invite and everybody giving your time to the time we spent together tonight.
No problem. Just before you all leave as well, we've got a couple more webinars if you're interested. Some of the recordings from previous ones already on the hub page, as I mentioned earlier. We've got some coaching ones, marketing ones, and then tomorrow we've got a one focused on female golf, which might be quite interesting, with a colleague from mine over in the UK. Finally, just want to finish with saying thank you all for attending again. And I hope you all have a fantastic day, evening, and week.